Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie, and we are back with our Best 22 episode for the upcoming 2024 season. Unbelievable. And in this episode, basically, we're both going to present our Best 22 lineups, discuss the current depth in each position, and even rank each player in the depth chart. It is going to be the ultimate squad analysis episode. We can't wait to get stuck in. But Lockie, first, we need to start where we are always going to start on each episode this year, and that is by discussing the hottest topics from last week. And we have some big news.
Yes, there is some big news, which I think we're both pretty pleased about.
Yeah,
the rumor mill was swirling, and it was confirmed that Vossi has re-signed for another couple till 2026, and aligned with that head honcho Cookie as well till 2025. So it's very exciting for the club.
It definitely is. And look, there's been, I think, a lot of differing opinions when it comes to these re-signings. So, Lockie, I guess, what do you make of them? And is this that example of stability that I think we've been talking about for years?
Is it ever? My God, have we been waiting for this? Some genuine stability in the front office. Yeah, I mean, I can understand people having doubts about certain things. Like I've heard people talking about Vossi, well, how do we know that the end of last season is real and not the start of the season and those kind of things? But yeah, for me, I have full confidence in our three biggest leaders, I suppose, in the front office. And I'm so glad that they are going to keep that stability for at least another year.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I mean, we even maybe add Sayers into it to a degree, but him, Cookie, and Voss are the clear three standout leaders of this football club. They're the ones that put together this 5-year strategic plan. We've mentioned it multiple times on the pod, how with none of those guys really contracted to the end of that 5-year plan, which I think ends in about 2027 is that mark. Felt a bit weird not having them all contracted. So now that we've at least got, Vossi till end of 2026, Cookie end of 25. Sayers, another one who wants to hopefully extend his term to the end of 2025. I think that's kind of the important thing for me. You can't have trying to make this short-term plan and then just not have anyone there, have it constantly changing coaches, trying to implement this. Like that just for me isn't what's going to work. And I agree with you. There's still for me obvious question marks, specifically, I think, around Michael Voss's coach. But I weirdly equally don't see this re-signing as premature. There's always still going to be pressure for him to perform, I think, regardless of the contract that he does have left. And coaches can be fired even while contracted. So I think just on the positive side of things, it gives that feeling of stability, unity, and probably like trust as well.
Yeah, I remember when we were, pretty down in the dumps midway through last season, and we weren't necessarily calling for it, but there was questions about, about Vossi and whether we should be looking elsewhere. And again, it's like, who at that time, and it's still relevant now, who would you rather have coaching?
Yeah.
It's not like that any of these decisions are silver bullets. You got a better CEO than Cookie you want to bring in. You got a better coach than Voss. Nothing's definite. So I'm very happy for us to just keep rolling with how we are.
Yeah. And I think just on the more Cookie and Sayers side of things, obviously it looks like Sayers is ending his term at the end of this year unless he gets it extended at the AGM this Thursday. But and with Cookie now extended another year as well, clearly there is a finite time to their journey. Cookie's been in the industry for a long period of time. He initially said when he signed with us that he was only going to be here for a few years and then get the next one to come through and kind of develop that and just bring that stability to this club before we move on to the new leaders. And I just think an extra year or so of these guys really allows the proper time to find the right people to take over and then keep that stability through with Voss. It's so ideal for me. We've constantly been trying to move on from everyone quickly as soon as it looks like things aren't working. I'm happy to show the faith, and with the motto "Stronger Together," I think you just got to back these guys until they prove that they're not worthy. And why not? Why not get that stability finally in the Carlton Footy Club?
100%. We've been crying out for it for years.
Yeah, and look, I think the other main kind of news, it's less of something that has happened, more of a look towards the future. And there is a practice match this Thursday morning, the first hit out really of the 2024 season against Geelong. Is there anything you're maybe looking out for specifically from this game? I know that's a big question to
No.
answer. Is there anything small, anything big that you're wanting to see from this game?
God, no, not yet. Oh my God, Ian, I did not expect that question, and my brain has not gone there yet. All I was doing was looking at how I can get it into my eyeballs on Thursday.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'll be able to catch a replay of it on KO at the end of the day. But you must have something. What are we going to be overreacting on next week?
See, I don't know. The big thing for me was just no injuries, which is so stupid to say. But seeing the likes of Hawthorn and what they've copped in the last week or so, that's the real just get us healthy, get us through. And I don't know. I'm not sure if there's anything specific as far as like game style, more maybe just individual players. I want to see what Fantasia can do in this lineup, some of the new young draftees, and maybe even a Zach Williams, some of the guys that we maybe didn't get to see a hell of a lot of last season. They're the ones I'm just keen to see them sprinkle into the squad and see what they can kind of add. But no, not a whole heap. I mean, if you're watching this live on YouTube on Blue Abroad, chuck it in the comments right now what you want to see from that match. What do you think about the re-signings of Vossi and Cookie? And if you're listening in audio form, wherever you listen to your podcast, head over to the socials at Navy Blue Corner, interact with us there. And again, links to all will be in the show notes, be in the description. But look, before we get stuck, I think, into the best 22 segment, we have to mention an important competition that is running again in 2024. That is the official Carlton Cheer Squad footy tipping competition. Now, Lockie and myself last year, look, we were poor. Our tips were trash, and we rightfully were nowhere near the top end of the leaderboard. And look, it's all right. We've regrouped. We will go again in 2024 because we're going to win this thing, you know? And look, the lovely team over there at the Carlton Cheer Squad, they've got some incredible prizes again up for grabs. Not only will the first place tipping leader win a 2024 Carlton team signed Guernsey, but mate, so will the people who finished second and third. Yes, you heard me. The top three places.
Now we've got a better chance.
The top three place tippers will all take home a 2024 Carlton team signed Guernsey, which, look, because Lockie and myself, we're clearly going to take home one of them because we're going to win the whole thing. That means there are two Guernseys left. So if you think you've got what it takes, want some bragging rights over your mates, and of course, over us here at the Navy Blue Corner, then head over to the link in the description and the show notes. Join the competition. It's only $25 to enter for your chance to take home one of 3 2024 team signed Guernseys. Lockie, I can't wait to win one of those.
We tried so many different strategies last season. We need to brainstorm how we're going to start this because it got tense at times.
It did.
We need to stay connected if we're going to come out with this.
I think our problem was we went too competitive against each other, almost rather than collective. We didn't listen to the stronger together. There was no stability. We've learned our lesson, like the Carlton of old, and we're going to go back bigger this year. But come along with the ride with us. I'm sure we'll be talking about it every single week on the podcast. But look, now let's get into the best 2022 segment. And there's been a bit of conjecture and negativity on it, pretty much around the idea of the best 2022, best 22 this off season.
Get it together.
Lockie, exactly. Now, I wanted to ask you a question though, Lockie. What do you kind of think about the whole concept itself and what it sort of offers to the squad discussion space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's something that has been a staple, I guess, for us ever since we kind of became mates talking Carlton, I feel like. It's always, I guess, a nice exercise to, I don't know, there's, you can make it, I guess, as objective or subjective as you like.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I like about it. So, you can caveat with how you want to talk about it, whether this is like, everybody fit and healthy, who do you want picked against Brisbane in opening round? Or is it, hypothetically the best players available? So, I think it's just a fun thing and helps us, I guess, talk about each player as well, which is a nice aspect.
No, I think so. And the big thing, I guess, with the best 22, like you're saying, is, what do you mean when you say best 22? That's probably the big discussion. And as you mentioned,
Yeah.
we've been doing this since we started the podcast, and it's really stayed the same each year. The best 22 for us is an everybody fit lineup that myself and Lockie would select if basically you almost had to play a game tomorrow and you needed to win to save your life, kind of thing. Like, biggest stakes possible. You have to choose the best possible team. And this is where I guess we're going to go into the specifics as we go through the lineup. Maybe Lockie has chosen just the best players. Maybe there's some squad cohesion and chemistry elements to it. That's up to the individual. Lockie and myself are going to take you through and explain it and why we've chosen each single player. Going to be very, very exciting. And yes, I want you to play at home. Come along for the ride and drop your best 22 and sub in the comments. And again, if you're listening to this instead of watching it over at Blue Abroad, head over to @NavyBlueCorner and let us know your best 22. So, Lockie, let's get this up here and let me know who your sort of your back 6 or 7 are, if you do have anyone on the bench in that position.
100%. I certainly do have someone on my bench, so I'll give it to you, I guess, from left to right. Probably makes the most sense.
We'll give it a
so
go.
For me, I've got Newman, Wiedering, and Sard across the back line.
Perfect.
Williams, Kemp, and McGovern across that line.
Ooh, yep. And do you have anyone on the bench, Lockie?
Chuck Big Sammy Doherty on the bench, if you wouldn't mind.
So I guess, first question there is, so you see this year Doherty more as a defender rather than his role last year being that mid winger and forward line as well?
You'll see it as a bit of a cohesion piece as we get through this one. I find it really difficult to forecast where Doc will be playing this season. But for me, with the guys that I'm looking for this best 22, I think he makes sense amongst those 4 halfbacks.
Interesting. Yeah, I've gone a little bit different here. I've got Marchbank in my first position.
Then I've obviously be in there too.
Well, he will be there shortly. Wiedering and then also Nick Newman. And then Williams and Sard as my halfbacks, with Mitch McGovern as my centre halfback. And then, yes, my bench spot is Jordan Boyd. So really, there's a couple of differences there. You've kind of gone, I guess, Kempy over Marchbank, and then we've gone slightly different in Doherty over Boyd. What is your, I guess, contention there why you would choose a Kemp over Marchbank?
Yeah, I think just as I think about the, any kind of tall, like strong, tall duos that we're going up against.
Yep.
One-on-one kind of matchup scenario. For me personally, I still would have Kemp ahead of, I guess, whoever you're going to put, Marchbank or McGovern, in that role.
Yep.
I really like having McGovern in that kind of key interceptor kind of position. So yeah, I'm interested to hear why you think Marchbank over Kemp.
This is the kind of thing for me, and this is probably where that wider discussion on the best 22 is honestly perfect, because there's going to be so many stages this year where, matchup dependent, I think it should be Kemp over a Marchbank, depending on how many key tools and we have coming against us. For me, the end of last season, seeing what Marchbank was able to do specifically in those finals games, I just thought he was absolutely tremendous. I like I maybe don't trust McGovern to be the nailed on key defender as the number 2. Maybe don't necessarily trust Marchbank either. So I think having the versatility of both of those to switch through that and the other be the interceptor is probably what I like a bit more there, rather than a Kemp who's maybe a little undersized. But I think Kemp's kind of that next one for me. It's between him and Marchbank. It might just be a little bit more matchup dependent, but I've gone Marchy, one, because I love him, and then I just think there's more versatility with McGovern there in the back 6.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't mind that at all. And I agree. It is going to be a matchup dependent thing. It'll be interesting to see, I guess, where we end up at the end of this season talking about this one, because I don't know. Do you see Marchbank as having scope to improve? Not kind of relevant to this conversation, but just more a general Marchbank thought.
I really think so, really, because of the limited football he's had due to all those injuries. Really only got that stretch of continuity late last season. we were so high on him years ago, before all of the injuries that have really
course.
stifled his career. I do think that there is still a ceiling that he can improve from what we have seen, because he hasn't had a full year yet. Has he had a full preseason and a full season? Not sure we've seen that. If he can stay healthy, I reckon there's a clear room for him to grow, much like a Kemp as well. He's still really,
Of
really
course.
young. But at the moment, I just feel like the floor for a fit Marchbank, I guess, is higher than a Kemp. But again, they're still slightly different players. So it will be interesting. I like it. Now, take me through your midfield, Lockie, starting at the wings, and you can go through it all however you like.
Sure. Give me the Sheriff, Akers, Cripps, and Ollie Hollins on the other wing.
Yep. Beautiful.
And then across the
ruckman?
follower line, big Brad Pitt.
Ooh, I almost did B for Pitternet. There you go. Interesting.
Plus Ches and Walshy.
Yes, I do like that. And do you have any extra ruckman, any extra midfielders you want to add onto the bench?
Yeah, chuck Georgie Hewitt and TDK on the bench if you wouldn't mind.
Can definitely do that for you. G Hewitt and decoding there.
You're doing very well on the fly here. I like it.
Yeah,
no
mate. Well,
that I can spot.
Absolutely none. Yeah, look, I've gone incredibly similar. I mean, my midfield line there across the wings is exactly the same. Gone slightly different. I've got De Koning as my starting ruck over the Pit, but I mean, it's basically the same thing. Hewitt's on my bench, and then Pitternet's also there. I've gone the dual ruck like yourself. Yep. So really, it's just a matter of pedantics. But why for you? I guess the big question out of that is, why do you believe we should be going with the two ruckmen is probably the biggest question to ask there.
It's probably the thing about my team that I have the least conviction in. I'll be very honest. I've honestly, I think I probably mentioned it last week. I've flip-flopped. That's not the right word for it. Flip-flopped isn't the right word. I've evolved my opinion, I think, as the off-season has gone on with this one. I think in a scenario that we don't, like if say that we don't have Pitt in this team right now, I just don't have enough confidence that TDK against a lot of really fantastic ruckmen in the league that he's got we're going to be using everyone to their best potential in that way. I think we want to be able to unleash TDK as spurts in the ruck where he can be really dominant, spurts up forward where he's starting to show, like in the finals, that okay, maybe there is something there, and if we can start causing some problems up forward if all the three tools are on, that's tasty to me. And I think that opportunity cost versus, I don't know, someone that you might not have in your team, like Matt Kennedy, for example, instead of a Pitt, I think I'd rather go the two rucks.
Yeah, probably my only thing, because again, this isn't everyone fit. So in this scenario, Jack Silvani is fit and ready to play. He really would have been the only other option for me. I think De Koning definitely there. And it's who's that other ruck? And I just don't maybe trust Silvani enough to play that role. It's something I've probably flip-flopped with quite a lot. Do we like Sauce as that second ruck? Do we want him just to play half forward? And now you've probably, I guess, I'll just say right now, Silvani actually, spoiler, isn't in my team. So for me there, knowing that he's an extra tall in that forward line, I don't want Pitt, De Koning, and Silvani in there. I feel like that's way too tall, especially with Marchbank down back for team sort of structure. Not for me. And I just, even though we're pretty harsh, I guess is the word, and critical on Pitternet in last week's episode, saying that he does still have a lot to prove and will maybe a little bit down by his contribution last year. There's still a lot of upside for what he can bring, being that extra bigger body around the midfield. You know how vital he is to putting on those blocks and shepherds, almost acting a bit as an extra body midfielder, I guess, in there, making those blocks, getting in the way to allow Cripper and the like to not have to be around the ball as much, get the ball on the outside a little bit more, not be as physical. I still think that's a big thing, and it allows De Koning more time to float forward. I agree with you on all those points, and I think until they can prove to me someone else like a Harry can play in the ruck, that's probably the best option, and I think that works. And probably the only other thing I'll just add here is I don't want to forget about him. Sam Doherty, I've got basically playing as a mid-rotation, kind of mid-wing, maybe a bit of high half forward as well. So just thought I'll throw him there on my bench to round things out, because you've already got him there. but I
I
just see
like
him
it.
maybe more as a mid forward at this stage.
I like it a lot. We're aligning a lot so far.
Yeah.
Forward line may have some differences.
Mm. Here we go. Hit me with it.
So give me Martin, Mackay, and Cottrell.
Yes. Yes.
Motlop, Kerno, and Owies.
Ooh, that's probably the controversial one there. If it is controversial at all, I mean, for the sake of discussion right now, I'll add mine in because it's basically the exact same thing.
Do it.
I've got Mackay, I've got Martin, I've got Cottrell there, got Motlop, got Charlie.
Don't have Charlie. Interesting.
I've got Fantasia as my
Yeah.
small forward. There is my basic one difference now. Who do you have on the interchange? Do you have another kind of forward in the mix? What rounds it out for you?
D. Cunningham.
Yeah, okay. There you go. That makes sense. So take me through why you have gone for always over the likes of a Fantasia Durden, and I guess why you have thrown Cunningham in there. What are you liking about him this year?
Definitely. As you kind of framed it up earlier, I definitely thought of this as, if we're putting this team out in the park on the weekend, what am I going to have the most confidence in to perform well? Man, I was going back and looking at like the raw numbers for Fantasia. If we get the best Fantasia that has played in the AFL, my God, he's in this team over Owies for me. But it's just crazy. 4 games in the last 2 years. Like, think back to when we were talking about when Kerno was going to return, when Cunningham was going to return, when Marchbank was going to return. We're like, the bar is so low here. We will take anything with that few games in those couple of years. So and this is why, I mean, you haven't done your sub yet, but that's another reason why I haven't got Elijah Hollands in my best 22, where I think other people may have him more around it. I just don't know what to expect out of those two guys yet. And I'm very, very open to putting Fantasia in this once I see, man, even the Melbourne game next week, I'm happy to be convinced just on that.
Yeah, I originally was like you and had always over Fantasia for all those reasons you really just said. And I will be honest, I don't have a great argument as to why he should be over always off really what we've seen. I know in this scenario, everyone's fit, everyone's, I guess, playing well, but we really haven't seen Fantasia play well in a few years. I think what I'm going clearly on potential and the ceiling of it, whereas always, obviously, our leading goal kicker as far as the smalls were concerned last year. So really proven more than you could really say on Motlop or the others. Really, for me, when I'm tossing up between the two, it's just who do I think can go to that next level? If I'm really just seeing a 50-50 option, I always go ceiling. And that's probably where I have them at the moment. Even though I haven't seen him, I have them so close to each other on par, which is maybe harsh, very much on Owies. I know we had that discussion last week, but yeah, I love a ceiling, and that's why I have gone Fantasia.
Totally.
But yeah, I think we will see in the next couple of weeks just the difference it'll make when you're fit and playing on field. All of a sudden, Owies could take that next step, kick all the goals in preseason games, and we're saying, what are we talking about? Fantasia has to work hard to get his spot. But yeah, I mean, good to know we don't have a lot of differences so far. It's very similar.
Yeah. For sure. And then, I mean, on Cunningham, I think it's an interesting one. This is another one that I'm very, very open to be persuaded on and changed. I guess a big theme for me last year was on role players playing their role. And, you know, guys like Matt Kennedy, for instance, who we know could come into this team and have 20 plus disposals in a game. But for me, for that kind of 7th forward, if you like, or that kind of bit of a swing guy, I want someone who's going to be able to be impactful with not getting as much as the ball. Someone that we aren't relying on to get heaps of it. Someone that can be impactful and tackle and do those things. So it was like, I think Fogarty kind of fits that mold in a way, and the club clearly liked what he did last year. But for me, I think Cunningham is a guy that, can have really good impact without having to have a whole ton of it.
I think this is where when I was trying to look at mine, I was still maybe a little bit unhappy with the complete forward line. And that's probably the double ruck conundrum with it. And having both of those
Sure.
players in there, I sort of lose an extra spot in my forward line. And I guess for depth, looking at the defense, you've had Doherty down there. I've got him more as that mid forward. And that was really because I'm just so high on Jordan Boyd this year. I think his pace and foot skills is really going to allow our back sort of 6 or 7 to flourish in that transition game. I love what I saw from Doherty being that guy in the midfield, moving on the wing, moving half forward, allowing a Walsh to rest on the half forward line. You know, Cottrell goes through the wing as well. Hollands can go in the midfield. I like that versatility of those few guys around there that can plug a lot of those holes. So I think that's where I'm probably looking at that high half forward role and saying we've got so many players that can play there that I just have, I guess, higher rated at the moment than a Cunningham.
Yeah.
That he just misses out. Probably the one I think I personally had over Cunners was Fogarty that you spoke about, who is really stiff not to make this lineup for me. He's probably the biggest snub, knowing that he's not talent-wise the best player we have, but role-wise, what he offers just allows everyone else to play so much better. And for that sake, I think he's really stiff to miss. But I don't know. I'm really excited to see over these preseason games if he can just maybe up his game slightly in other areas. Because I, as much as he's great for the cohesion of others, now that we've seemingly got so much depth with Cunningham, with Hollands and the others running through there, I feel he needs a few more strings to his bow, really, until I'm convinced that he's definitely in this team to start every single week. But he's definitely around the mark.
For sure. And that's the funny spot that I'm in with Boyd at the moment. I think I've definitely loved glimpses and like the prelim, for instance, like, of course, like if you watch that game in isolation, you're like, this guy's locked on. I don't know. If I think about all the guys that we've kind of spoken about today, I think he might have one of the biggest floor ceiling ranges for me. Like the kind of things that you were talking about last week and everything about him being someone to take a big jump this year. I could see that. But I could also, like, Chincotta is another guy that probably has to be called a snub. He played pretty much every game last year. And we haven't even mentioned him. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on Boydie being best 22 yet. But I'll be very happy to be proven wrong.
It's probably my favorite thing about this exercise is it feels somewhat easy, but it's also incredibly tough because, Chincotta, he'll play through the side multiple stages this year, and him not playing also feels incredibly stiff. You don't know if a Lockie Cowan takes a step this year, and there's going to be a lot of other players, which we will discuss when we go more specific into that, when we look at the depth chart as well. But it's not... And this is maybe where people don't like the best 22 because they feel we're only going to talk about the 22 and that's it. But this is a jumping off point to discuss who we're rating higher, who's missing out, why are they missing out, what do they have to do to basically break into this team. And it's the most depth I've really ever seen us have. And not in the way of we have depth because you don't want anyone on the list to play in the team. So everyone's crap so they can all play. We've actually got good players now. And there's the best 30 or 35 that I'm pretty confident if there's an injury or someone has to step up or, there's the selection meltdown of X player being selected, it's going to be completely justified because I think the talent is finally there for the depth. But in saying that, we're allowed one more player as the sub. It's always a contentious one because you can kind of allude to why you've chosen them in the sub for a multitude of reasons. Who have you got and why, Lockie?
Just quickly, I wish we could have played that little speech that you just did to ourselves like 3 years ago. Like just go back and play it to those men because I feel like just knowing that would have been like, oh my God, thank God this is going to end soon. So that's Boydie for me. Yeah,
interesting. Why have you gone Boyd in a positional sense? Normally, I guess, to be critical, which I always will, because always will. My team's better, blah, 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 all that competitive nature. Why have you gone, I guess, a defender in this role when I think most people, when they look at a sub, tend to be midfielder or a forward half kind of player? Why is it Jordan Boyd for you?
I think at the end of the day, we know that when any injury occurs or any change to the team during a game, magnets are going to move. So currently I've got Doherty as my kind of like swing guy. You know, we'll make that work. If a mid goes down, chuck Boyd in the back. Oh, look at that. Doc's got some more mid time, and that feels good to me.
Nah, it's a nice little way to still have that versatility, and maybe we need that impact from the halfback to generate the ball forward for us. I do like that.
Why not?
I have gone the other Hollands brother in my sub spot. You know, I like versatility more in the front half for my sub. Matty Cottrell was always my sub, and now he's just too good. He has to be starting each and every week if fit. So I need someone to replace him. And it was really down to 3 players in that spot. It was Cunningham, it was Fogarty, it was Elijah Hollands. And maybe this is too soon going off. I haven't maybe seen a hell of a lot of him in a Carlton jumper. And maybe that's where it should be Cunners or Fogarty instead. But again, I'm going that ceiling piece of I just think he can impact the midfield more from what I have seen if he needs to go in there. And then high half forward, I just think his ball use is probably really, really good. I know, Cunners is really clean, but I'm just really excited with what I think Hollands can bring to this. And maybe I'm just buying into the hype of everyone that seemingly has had their eyes on him in the preseason. But he's got a lot of work to do because he's not going to play the first couple of rounds. And if a Cunningham plays, anyone else locks that position down, it's going to be almost impossible to break in.
What would get you more excited? I know we're not going to get too carried away on Thursday, but would an elite Elijah Hollands game or an elite Fantasia game get you more up and about?
Ooh. I think it'd probably be Fantasia because I think that small forward's still been feels harsh to say problem area, but we still haven't really had that guy we can trust week in, week out to hit the scoreboard since a prime Eddie Betts and even a almost close to retirement Eddie Betts. It feels like we haven't had that guy. Hope Motlop can step up in that capacity. But for what I think Fantasia can bring that we maybe don't have elsewhere, I think I'm going for that smaller forward.
I like it. I hope we see that so I can just slice him into this team in post.
Yeah, no, so I absolutely love that. So really there is not a lot of differences in this team.
Are you surprised?
At all? I mean, this
is what we do.
We're normally aligned. So let's get the best 22s away and let's jump into the depth chart. So this is where basically we're going to try and lock in a best 22 combined with each other, which will be quite interesting. And then this is where we're going to look at the further depth, explain who's probably in contention to play outside of that, where we rank them, and really just a better way to look at the full squad, discuss each and every player that is out there. Let me get this up on screen for you all. And if you're listening to this in audio form and you feel like you want to be able to see the players' names, see it all better, head over to Blue Abroad. That is where we are on YouTube now. We'll be there every single Wednesday night. It's going to be very, very exciting. So I think let's start at the key defense. I'll try and lock this in. And Lockie, if I do anything you don't like, feel free to stop me and let me know. Key defender, I think if you're looking at the number 1 ranked, it's got to be Wiedering. Are you happy to lock him into that number 1 spot?
I will. I'll speak when I'm displeased.
Yeah. McGovern as the number 2. Now, this is the bit we need to discuss. Yeah. Is it Marchbank or Kemp as that 3rd?
I mean,
You've
for
obviously
me,
gone Kemp.
If I was going to die on a hill of, say, this decision versus the small forwards, I feel more passionately about this one personally.
Yep.
I actually think the difference between Kemp and Marchbank is more significant than it is for any of the smalls.
Okay, look, I'm happy to go with you on this one. I'm happy to give that a go. Because really, that's probably the biggest position I can see weekly, just changing purely on matchup rather than talent for me. Like you come up against, if we're coming up against a Brisbane or a team that tends to play 3 tools, would you go a Marchbank over Kemp if it was a pure height thing down back? Or would you still vehemently play Brodie?
Yeah, I think for me, those top 3 in green are week in, week out locks, and bring Marchbank in as a 4th if required. But
Okay.
yeah, I can't think of a scenario where I'd play Marchbank and no Kemp personally.
Interesting. Who is your next key defender? Is it Sam Durden or is it Lewis Young? This is probably the other contentious part.
I'm not too passionate about this. I know that you have Durden above Young currently, so I'm happy to go with that.
Yeah, I weirdly,
unless you've changed your tune,
I'm happy to have Lewis Young above him just because I think ceiling again. We talk about that.
Yeah,
last year probably you're a bit higher on Durden because you saw more of the mistakes of a Lewis Young, but I don't know. The fact that this guy can probably come into the ruck if you need him to, he was still really good. And we were saying he was the number 2 the year before, which is insane. Now looking at it. So I think I'm happy to have Lewis Young above him there. And then I guess Dom, a Q will come down into that last spot where we haven't really touched on Young, Durden and Dom. Where do you kind of see them playing this year and how far away are they from this, I guess, starting lineup? If everyone's fit or if there are a few injuries.
I mean, I need to go back and have a look just at how many, because I think Young actually played more games last year than I expected. Yeah, he played 15 games last year. It feels like so much less. So I'm with you. I think we will see Young at times during the year, particularly with Wiedering going down. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see the other 2 guys at all this year, I reckon.
I think there's Lewis Young maybe is that player that no one's talking about that potentially we should be, especially with the Wiedering injury. He obviously still has a lot to show, but I don't know, just going back a couple of years and when Wiedering was injured, he was stepping up and being our best defender. We were all so excited, so bullish on this steal that we'd gotten from the Dogs. It's fallen off, I guess, quite a lot where we're now saying, is Durden higher than him? Maybe we should be really keeping our eye on what he can do in these practice matches and if he's maybe got more of the composure back that we saw. But I agree with you. I think Young probably has that higher spot. And then it's really if there's just injuries and Dom, Dom, I just think he still has a fair way to go and develop. I'm not convinced he's ready just yet, but who knows? Maybe he has a massive year in the VFL this year. Now, looking at the defenders, Adam Sard, your number 1?
I think you've actually nailed the hierarchy of what I'm seeing there, at least for the top 5 for me.
Beautiful. I'll then go Nick Newman. I think proven on what he was last year that you could almost debate and say whether he's number 1 with what he's able to do everywhere. But those 2 there, I think a fit Zach Williams is probably just over your Jordan Boyd. And this is probably the contentious bit. I don't have Doherty as a defender because I don't think he's really been training there from what I've seen. So I'm happy to move him away from that now. And then Jordan Boyd comes into this now. Probably should just say, because I forgot to mention this for the visual, because you're seeing a lot of colors and you're probably going, what on earth do these mean, Ian? I'm not inside your head. I've got no idea. Basically, green is, I probably should have mentioned this at the top. It'll be on your screen. I'm sure there'll be a key on here at some stage, but basically the green is best 22. I've tried to even out all the positions as per kind of what Lockie and I were selecting and the many amount of players per position. Yellow is going to be that best 30. I think when you see the names, they're going to be the positions that next rung of player is in. We can definitely change it as we go. And then orange is more depth. They're probably that just extra step behind the other players, but there's definitely going to be some conjecture. I'm happy for you guys in the comments to let us know if you agree, disagree, what's your ranking. That's what it's all about. This isn't just what we think. We want to know what you guys think, and maybe we can get a collective best 22 collective depth chart going for the year. I believe there, Lockie, that my next kind of depth player is Chincotta. I have him just behind Boyd. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. Like I said before, it's crazy that, he was such a locked-on guy last year that he's probably out of there now, but that's the nature of bringing Zachy Williams back in.
It is. And the interesting part of this again, and talking about this kind of depth chart is, we have him below probably on talent. But again, I think the way we've spoken about Kemp, the way we've said Marchbank, matchup dependent, it wouldn't surprise me if, because we know Sard and Williams and maybe even Boyd, is that too much reliant on purely attacking football? Is that, I know obviously those guys can defend, but I probably rate Chincotta's one-on-one defending a little bit more than some of them with his tackle pressure. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if we're going, okay, first few games, if we were playing the other 4 guys out there, that, okay, we're leaking too much, we're too attacking. Maybe that's where only 2 of Assad, Williams, and Boyd can play, and you need the defensive pressure of Chincotta. But any of those guys playing, I'm incredibly happy. And then dropping down the depth, I've got Lockie Cowan as my next. I think that's someone who we've probably seen some of what he can offer. He's got a little bit more height as well, maybe play a bit more of that third tall eventually as he puts on size. And then I basically, just to round it out, it'll be Billy Wilson, who may play some midfield as well throughout the year. Big old Carroll, and then Rob Monaghan, who, I'll be honest, I have seen so little of, but I'm just going to throw him on halfback because I feel like that's the easiest spot to chuck him. If he's a running player, that's where he's going to learn the game the most.
I like it.
What do you think of, I guess, that kind of next row of depth? Do you see any of those guys playing this year? What's their kind of role and expectations around them? Do you think any of them need to break into the best 22 this year?
I don't think they necessarily need to. I mean, it's always an interesting time of the year where we can see like a guy like Cowan could have just taken a big step in preseason. Like, it's a long time since we saw him last. So you never know. But man, I would be so surprised if, I mean, I could see a scenario where he, is a better selection than Chincotta. But if he's breaking above those green 4, I'd be extremely surprised.
No, I tend to agree. We're really at this stage, which is such a positive place to be. We've never really had this where we've got young guys like Cowan, Billy Wilson, who everyone's incredibly high on from what they've seen in pre-season training, but we don't have to play them for once. This isn't a Paddy Dow, Lockie O'Brien. We've got no one else. Here you go, learn in the AFL. They don't need to play, and they don't need to play not only just first year, second year, third year. We can be like Geelong, be like Sydney, who spend years making sure that these guys are absolutely ready to go. Cowan's had a bit of a taste, which is definitely a positive aspect. Wouldn't surprise me if these guys play a handful of games throughout the year if there are injuries and form, I guess, warrants it. But we're just not in that position where we're desperate for these guys to have to play straight away and prove it. We can finally, hopefully, build their confidence in getting them to understand the game plan and their own football skills in the twos for once.
Again, I wish 3 years ago or 4 years ago we could have told ourselves that we'd be here. Feels good.
It's good. Now, I think we both, okay, maybe we don't. I've got DeConing over Pitt. Are you happy with that?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And then we've got Pitt. And then, I don't have a yellow in this spot. I think it drops off a little too much. So I've then got Hudson O'Keefe and Murkov. For the sake, really, of O'Keefe being, I was a bit more excited about what I saw in the twos, the back end of last year, and his ability to be a bit more of a marking forward as well. We spoke about it last week where that's that next evolution for the Rucks. Can you play multiple positions? Maybe he develops more as a forward. Who knows? But currently, I just have him, I guess, higher than Murkov, and hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
we don't have to see either of them this year because that's me being positive rather than being negative on
positive.
Their talent. I just want everyone else to be fit and firing, so we don't need them.
Yes, ideally the guys in green are the only guys that we see this year, and we have the first ever season of 23 players only needed, and that's it.
It'd be great. Now, midfield. Excited to rank these. Who's your number one midfielder?
Wow. Wow.
Who's the most important piece in that midfield for you? Who's number one?
Yeah, I think it is Sam Walsh.
Yeah, I've got Sam Walsh as well.
Yeah.
And it feels weird to say.
It does.
Really, you could toss a coin. If you were really fighting for Rick, I'd be happy to do that. I just think that, it feels rude to say.
Close.
But what Walsh has kind of shown in the back half of last year, going forward, hitting that scoreboard a little bit more, I feel like he's number one. But who knows? Maybe Cripper can go down forward and be that guy to win us games down there. I've then got Patrick Cripps, Adam Chera. If I can add this in, George Hewitt, then Doherty. What are your thoughts? Do you have one above the other there?
I'd be flipping those two. but
Okay, I'm happy with that.
I can
I'm
understand
happy
it.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned last week, I'm a little bit, maybe just a little down on Hewitt going into this season. Hopefully, he'll prove me wrong.
Yeah, my thoughts
Can't
really
believe.
were
Oh, go
Hewitt's
ahead.
that more like he's going to be playing midfield. Doherty's a bit more swing, can play some other positions. So that was really why I had him lower. But yeah,
I mean, if one of
we're
them,
splitting.
but if one of them was going to miss the game, I'd rather have Doherty playing personally. But I agree
Yeah,
with
and
you
I
on the
think
nature
that's
of the players.
really probably because you've got Matty Kennedy as that next one. I've then got Jack
Yeah,
Carroll
it's a
to
good
round
point.
that out as the step below. Kennedy, what has he got to do to take over George
Oh,
Hewitt's spot? We briefly spoke about it last week. I don't think we got into the specifics of what it would take. Why would you, if you're pitching for Kennedy to play over Hewitt, why would that be?
wow, that's a really good question. Like, I don't think it would actually take a lot, and I think the best that we've seen from Kennedy, should be a best 22 player in theory. Like on the talent perspective that you spoke about earlier, like he should be in starting 22 teams, in my opinion. It's just that these five guys ahead of him right now are so damn good. I don't know what case I would make. What would you make?
I think I'd probably say it's the other elements of what he can maybe offer over Hewitt. If you're just saying as a midfielder, I would say Hewitt is better. He's a better inside mid. I think his hands are cleaner under pressure. It's then everything else. Kennedy better overhead mark around the ground. And there were a few times last year when we were playing really poor football that he was above George Hewitt in the pecking order. When we weren't moving the ball well and you just needed to hit a target to take some pressure off, you were going a 2-on-1, a 1-on-1 in a bad spot, Matty Kennedy, because you trusted him to take that mark. And that's probably the element he can add. There's that. He can kind of take a mark down forward as well. I don't want him playing in the forward line. I don't really like it. But if everyone's injured, you'd rather that over a George Hewitt. So I think that slight versatility maybe takes that spot over him. But yeah, it's the toughest maybe position in the team for the sake of, I agree. I think any other club, just about, he probably starts in another midfield. He will play plenty of football. I can't see a world, touch wood, that every single player in that midfield plays every single game. It just never happens. Well, someone will get suspended. Someone will miss a week with something, or you're just resting a player. So he's going to play games of football. It's just a matter of who takes it. And yeah, it's a nice midfield to look at, I think, there. Last one was, I guess, Jack Carroll. Do you think this is the year he takes that step and moves towards more of the yellow than the orange on screen?
Interesting. I mean, I feel like if that's going to happen, it's going to be from those super, super solid VFL performances like you spoke about last week. Yeah, I'd just be so shocked if he played more than a handful of games in the ones.
I agree. He's definitely someone that the VFL is basically his to run now. There's no doubt. There's no Ed Kerno. It's pretty much he's the leader down there, which is maybe what he needs to take that next step. I do need to see more from him. I'm maybe not 100% convinced like others. I want to see it. I hope he can do it.
No,
Definitely, hoping he can get it done. He just needs to do it this season. And yeah, maybe he can start to jump over some of the others for the sake of he's a slightly different player. He's maybe more of the Cheryl Walsh than an inside bull. Does that allow him to play that high half forward role or maybe play the wing potentially? But yeah, it's a good depth and dilemma to have. You've got to be the absolute best in the AFL to break into this midfield, and I think that's a good thing. Now looking at the wingers, I think Blake Acres absolutely number one, Ollie Hollins, and then maybe you could argue Jackson Binns should be yellow. I will say because he has not played an AFL game yet, I've got him in the orange. But I mean, yeah, again, very, very. Yeah, there's not a lot between it.
Yeah. I mean, you made the point about, those guys are no longer in the VFL, like Kerno and Dow and O'Brien. They were also the guys that were fringe into the ones, which meant that, they were the ones that got opportunities at random times when we needed someone. So it does present the opportunity for guys like Binns and Carroll that it's kind of like, well, now that those guys aren't there, we might have to call on them. So Yeah, I think you'd agree that it'd be more likely that we see Binns kind of in that yellow slot at the end
Yeah.
of the season than Carroll, for example.
Definitely agree. And probably the harsher thing on Binns around the wing is just that even though I don't have them in this category on the graphic that you'll see right now on YouTube, there's so many other players that can kind of jump into that role. Like Doherty can go through there, Walsh, Chera, Cottrell, Elijah Hollands if you're desperate. There's so many guys that can play that role that I would say if a Hollands gets injured and Akers gets injured, you're starting to pull from those positions before Binns at this stage. But I mean, he won the VFL BNF in his first season, which is a really positive thing. If he can take another step and add to this team come the end of the year, and we're saying that he is best 22, that's really exciting. I don't think it's a negative thing that we're saying they're out of the top 30 or so. It's just based off what we've seen right now. That's just kind of where they are. This is probably going to be the next hardest thing to judge. General kind of half forwards. Is Jack Martin your number one? I feel tentative in saying that. Who are you rating highest?
Yeah, I mean, when you in relation to these names that you got there, I think yeah, you got to. I do agree with the top two, Martin and Cottrell.
Yep,
and
Cottrell number two.
And then those three are a lot closer for me. I'm happy to go with your. I mean, those four really.
There's a few. So yeah, I think Martin, what he does, perfect. Cottrell, versatility, and we've got him as one of the real ones to watch this season. Very bullish on the steps he can take forward. This is the hardest part. There's honestly kind of that one spot left. I guess I have in this your best 22, and you can honestly between the four of them, it can honestly be either of them. For me, and I say best 22. I've actually got 23 players there. I'll be honest. There is that extra for the sub. But who are you having, Lockie? Gun to your head. You have to pick one of those four for that last spot. Is it Cunners for you?
Yeah, I guess it is. And you could make an absolute, reasoning behind any of those four. But yeah. You take this one. I got the Kemp. I got the Kempy.
See, I would say Hollands. I would be, if we want to put it in the middle, if neither of us are convinced, this is maybe very controversial. I would have Fogarty over Cunners. So I would be happy to have Fogarty in there as both of us can't decide. So Fogarty takes the spot, which is kind of weird to say, but
I would have Fogarty over Hollands right at this point in time, just because I just can't put my money on Hollands yet.
Okay, split the difference. Then Jack Silvani, or where do you see Sauce? If he was fit, where would you see him? That's the big discussion. I know it's maybe pointless to have it now, but considering he's not there, a spot opens up. Where did you rate him in the space of this team?
Oh, it's so hard because it's so circumstantial to the ruck situation for me. Truly, like it creates such an extra element to it. If you tell me Pitternet is not in this team anymore, then then you just have to have Sauce in there. And it's crazy because he's done so many good things, and he's been a guy that we've loved over the years for everything that he's done. I think if he was fit, he would be fighting for selection every single week. Like it would always be a question of, oh, gee, Martin didn't have a great game. Do we just pull the pin? That kind of thing.
I think so. This is honestly the hardest part of the depth where, honestly, all of those players, apart from Ashton Moir, and weirdly, give it a couple of weeks, he could be in this conversation completely off an evidence-based thing as well. They're almost all yellow, where maybe apart from Jack Martin and Cottrell, it's just like, I don't know, you're all in contention. It depends on form, depends on fitness, really. But I've just got them ranked like this. And for now, for the sake of it, let us know what you think, and maybe we'll come back to this once we've got the audience feedback. But it's Martin, Cottrell, Fogarty as the best 23. Then the next three players are the best 30 in Hollands, Cunningham, and Silvani, and then Ashton Moir is below them. But yeah, it's probably the most exciting part of the field where any of these guys could take that step.
Yeah, truly.
Key forwards, Almost so easy.
Chuck him in.
Charlie's number 1. Harry's number 2. There is a gap, unfortunately, and then it is Harry. Lemmy, I think we don't need to say a lot on that. Harry Lemmy just needs to keep improving. He'll be fine. Excited to see what he can do in VFL and take a step, but needs a bit more time. Small forwards. This is the contentious part. Happy for Motlop to be number 1?
Yep. Definitely.
What are we doing? Are we doing Owies first or Fantasia?
I'm comfortable putting Fantasia in there. I mean, even though I said I'm really wanting to see the evidence first, like in a him versus Elijah Hollands discussion, for example, I know what I've seen from Fantasia at his peak, and I'm just going to have faith that, everything's going to go right for us this year. And that means that he's going to be like the bargain get of the season.
No, I agree. And probably the only harsh part there is Corey Durden not in the top 30. It's really just because we've run out of spots. The only argument I'll say why he is below that is I would say Motlop, Fantasia, and Owies are all above him. And there's a gap there rather than it being the other way. I think we can all make the argument between Fantasia and Owies. No one at the moment, based off what we have seen, is really saying that Durden is 100% in that conversation. Still has a bit of work to go. But much like, I guess, like a Binns and those other players, mate, give him 2 games and all of a sudden he's nailed on every single week. And what has impressed me with a Durden to try and sell him for the sake of it, last game of the regular season last year, we didn't play well. Tell you what, Durden was close to, being one of the better players on the field, really fighting for a spot. He had something to play for, kicked a few goals, didn't play a lot of games. If you look at his return games per goal, it was actually quite impressive for what he did last year. And with that, and being still so young, if he can just get on top of the body and get that full preseason, which I think he's still at the moment not in full training, he's sort of on that modified program, not playing 100% just yet. If he can get that sorted and start to get months or so in the VFL, the ceiling is still there 100% for Durden. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, he'd be the closest of all those names in the red to me to being a yellow guy. Like if we go into opening round and Motlop, Owies, and Durden were in the team, it's like, I don't know. That's just I would not be shocked if that happened. So yeah,
that was probably going to be my last question on somewhat of the depth. I've still got a few others pertaining to other things, but we've obviously coded this for X amount of players in each position to play for our structure. You kind of alluded to it there. Would you mind seeing 3 small forwards rather than 3 general half forwards at stages, depending on lineup? Is that something that you believe will happen?
I believe it will happen, but I'm not really a big fan of it. When we've seen that, and I mean, it's different because these guys are all getting better, like we hope. So this is probably the best kind of little crop that we've had. But I don't know. I just think with the impact that these guys have on the game, like if it was the choice of having one of them or 3, I would honestly lean towards 1. Just considering some of the other guys that aren't getting a game.
If Motlop alters his game slightly and becomes more of a pinch-hitting midfielder or pushes a bit higher up the ground, that would really be the only way I would see it being a first-choice option, just given the amount of depth we have higher up the ground with the cohesion. You could almost say Jack Martin's a small forward as well if you wanted to make that argument. Same with a Fogarty, but I think they can do a little bit more higher on the ground, which is why we've got them there. But I think forward half is really the most interesting aspect of what will happen this season. Would not surprise me if, end of the year, it's a completely different depth chart. And we're going to keep updating you, I think, throughout the year with this. I like it as a tool to see who's locked in, who's on the fringes, and where are they on the pecking order if they are fit. It's an exciting thing. Just, I guess, lastly, talking about this playing list, there's a few questions that I want to ask you before we wrap this episode up. Seeing it all laid out in front of you, any question marks still over the list? Is there a position that worries you? Is there depth anywhere that still worries you headed into the 2024 season?
I mean, you make it easy for me, don't you? With the columns that don't have the old yellow or oranges. I mean, it's the ruck for me. I you know, I'm sick of talking about it every time we do a depth chart discussion, I guess. But that's the line where an injury to one of those guys would probably get me the most nervous, I'd say. No, actually, that's not true. Key forward, if there was an injury, would get me more concerned, but ruck would be close next to it.
Yeah, those two for me, exactly the same reasons. It's just that drop off quite a lot where I don't feel comfortable if round one, touch wood. If this happens, we'll end the podcast because of this. If there's injuries to the point where an O'Keefe, Murkov, or Harry Lemmy have to play, then I think we're in a lot of trouble. That is not an ideal scenario. That means that not only are the players in green injured, but alternatives and every other plan is out the window because of it. Fingers crossed it doesn't get to that this year. And fingers crossed O'Keefe and Lemmy take the step that at the end of this year, this isn't a concern anymore. Totally. That's probably the positive spin to it, but I think those are clearly the glaring aspects. And then maybe you could still say small forward, half forward, if Cunningham can't get over the body issues, if Fantasia's not fit, Durden has the issues, and no one really takes the step, then 12 months later, we're still going to be saying, oh, is Cunningham going to be good this year? Is Holland's going to be good? I don't want to be having those conversations when we wrap up this year, because that means that the season hasn't gone well. But yeah, I think those are probably the main issues when you do look at it. And then, probably the last question that I really, really have is just that with the Sauce injury, it obviously leaves a list spot open. At the moment, it doesn't seem as if we will be bringing anyone in. I think potentially it was like today or yesterday that it closed before the start of the season.
Oh, is that right?
To train on players. I might be incorrect on that. Someone smarter than me will be able to correct me in the comments on that one. But Carlton have basically come out and said that they're not going to add to it now. We'll take that spot into the mid-season draft. What type of player? You don't have to say an exact player. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to make you go through the VFL or local footy to try and find a superstar, but we'll go to our favorite segment, the typewriter. What type of player would you like to see us add to the squad come mid-season in where you're seeing the maybe problems with the squad?
If you know, the typewriter. Bring it back. It just has to be what we discussed then, I think, for me. And I'll be honest, Ian, I did do a little, the tiniest bit of research. And
who have you got for me?
Zero names. Yep. I looked and I was like, it's just not there. Like, I don't know if there's a player necessarily that maybe you have one that would give me more confidence than, say, the young guys that we have who, like, they're just complete unknowns, I guess, for us at this point. But you must have one.
Look, I don't amazingly. It's probably the one player that I said for us to target in the offseason if we did have a list spot. And I still don't love it, which is why it kind of almost shouldn't even be brought up. But it was the Gold Coast key forward, Brodie McLaughlin, in the fact that he was tied leading goal kicker in the VFL last year, bit more mature, aged body, in that if we were desperate and needed someone to come in, he's serviceable is probably the best way to describe it. But I'm not confident on that. And I feel the best thing we've done is we're waiting on it, because maybe someone throughout the season rises as that key forward ruck target that we're desperate for. And all of a sudden you go, cool, he's perfect. Serves as a list spot, whether it's someone who was delisted, someone that maybe wasn't drafted. How many of those mature age recruits seem to come out of nowhere, which is always exciting. Or, worst case, maybe there's an injury to another position and we're now desperate. Maybe all the players in the halfbacks get injured and we go, we need someone else there. I like the option of versatility rather than shoehorning someone in now when I don't think it really fixes the problem, regardless of who you bring into that Jack Silvani spot.
Yeah, that's my feeling too. Well, good thing for us, it closed yesterday, according to you.
Exactly. So we absolutely love it. But look, that is basically going to wrap up this week's episode. Between Lockie and myself, we didn't have many players different in our best 22. Lockie had Brody Kemp, Matty Owies, and David Cunningham. I had Caleb Marchbank, Fantasia, and Elijah Hollins. Let us know who's 22 plus the sub you liked. Drop your 22s in the comments if you're watching here at the Blue Abroad channel on YouTube, or if you're listening in podcast form at Navy Blue Corner to whatever social media platform you interact with us on. And if you want to follow us, stay up to date, never miss anything, make sure you head over to our socials and give us the follow. And yeah, it is a great time to be a Carlton supporter. We're about to play our first game of footy for the season. Very, very excited. And look, we'll be back next week basically to chat and discuss all the big breaking Carlton news that we're going to be doing every single week. And we're going to give a bit of a review to the practice match as well against the Cats. Look, we can't wait to finally be chatting about some actual football being played. That's going to finish this episode. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.